Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and before we continue with the video, I do want to say that I made a bunch of videos that are mass-produced ahead of time while I'm trying to toughen out Hurricane Florence. So this is one of those videos, and the next few videos are very much in the same way. They're mass-produced for you guys to have someone to watch while I'm AFK and cannot work on videos, trying to, wait out the hurricane. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this type of content. Hopefully it is at least somewhat mildly entertaining. We'll get back to regular scheduled programming after the natural disaster has passed us. But until then, I do hope you guys enjoy the videos. Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and in today's video, I got a question multiple times on stream. I get these kind of questions a lot, actually. I get questions of, hey Dalrin, what is the best rogue for X? What is the best rogue for leveling? Dungeons, Mythic Plus dungeons, raids, group content, solo content, washing your hair with. There's so many of those. And in this video, I want to ask and try to answer the Mythic version of this question. What is the best rogue spec for Mythic Plus? I do want to show you guys some graphs. I do want to explain you guys a little bit the difference between the specs and try to help you guys figure out, especially if you're someone new, which spec you might want to try and kind of how you should transition with the specs as you learn. First of all, if you're someone who wants to do rogue stuff like competitive for PvE, you want to get really good at your spec, you shouldn't be looking at specific specs. You can, but for a player to be more well-rounded, to learn how all three specs function and being able to adjust and adapt between one and the other is going to be helping you. Because the balancing thing in World of Warcraft is a fickle thing. Sometimes one spec will be the flavor of the month, and then give it a month or two, and then a whole nother spec is now the best. So being able to adjust and adapt based on the situation, that's going to help you. But you guys are in luck with rogues, because it looks like 3 rogue specs, all 3 of them, are viable for Mythic Plus. On the Radar.io graphic, and I know not everybody's happy with using Radar.io, they do track a lot of people, and anybody who pushes keys, it will track their character. Radar.io basically creates its own score for anybody who does Mythic Plus dungeons, and the better you do these dungeons, the higher the keys, the faster you get them done, the better your score will be. So I know some people don't like it because they feel like they're getting rated by a third-party program, which in a sense they kind of are, but at least it'll be used in this video as a way for me to show you guys examples of how all 3 rogue specs are doing on the spread. Now when you take a look at the spread of the specs, Outlaw is looking like it's leading ahead, but I wouldn't really count it too much. I mean, when you take a look at Hunters, that's where you have a spec that's leading the charge. I just think Outlaw is, with all the changes for BFA, is a little bit more friendly to a lot of new players or people that never tried Outlaw before, and it plays a lot like combat rogues of the old, which most people can remember. So because of that, I feel like a lot more people are giving a try for Outlaw, of its ease of play and ease of play style between single target and AoE, the whole blade flurry mechanic. I feel like that's what's really causing the spec to be really popular. But if you take a look at Radar.io, you'll see that at the higher keys, there's actually Subtlety rogues, there's Assassination rogues, and Outlaw rogues. All 3 specs of rogues are doing high-end keys. And of course, it's going to be depending on your composition. It could be partially with the changes that Blizzard has done to Mythic Pluses, where it doesn't try to prioritize and make classes with a B-res, for example, a lot more useful to the team, a lot more useful to the progression of the content. It doesn't prioritize any specific classes with huge AoE damage or AoE stuns nearly as much. There's a lot more diversity in how you can approach a lot of these dungeons, which I think allows for a lot more diversity for different compositions, which allows all 3 specs of rogues with everything they are unique about, whether it's big cleave for Outlaw, bursty damage for Subtlety, or a really interesting gimmicky garrote damage for Assassination, to make the specs work in specific builds. But let's take a look at all 3 specs real quickly to figure out if they are good. I know that Outlaw is good because I've been playing it, and I find a lot of advantage to playing the spec. It's a fairly easy to play spec with a buff mechanic that is not as intrusive as it used to be, although the playstyle I'm playing is definitely not an easy one right now. I could drop a few Azure bonuses to go to a really mind-numbingly easy though, but I do like to keep up damage. The spec itself specializes in being able to have strong sustained damage, but also cleave. Cleave is insanely strong in Mythic Plus dungeons, especially in mobs and dungeons like Motherlord, for example. There's a lot of trash in there. So being able to cleave down the trash, I guess effectively, like, just cleave it down equally is the advantage of Outlaw, because Blade Flurry will do 45% of single target damage unless talented to everybody else. This also allows Outlaw to focus on single target damage, where you can't quite choose and change your gear in dungeons. This makes Outlaw an easy choice, because you just focus on single target, turn on Blade Flurry for any AoE, and you're good to go. Outside of that, the spec brings a gouge. So a gouge actually is very useful. It can be used to disrupt channels, it can be used in a place of a stun to stop a cast. So it's actually very, very useful because so many classes have stuns these days. So being able to bring an incapacitation effect, unlike a monk incapacitation or a demon hunter one that is on a fairly short cooldown, it's actually very advantageous for Outlaw rogues. Of course, Subtlety is a very powerful spec as well. Big burst damage with a single target or AoE. You are probably gonna go for big AoE damage in most Mythic Plus dungeons, but it allows your big burst to also transfer and carry over into good single target damage, or at least decent single target damage. The advantage of Subtlety rogues is the fact that they can focus down one target in AoE situations. By using abilities like Shuriken Storm, which will build a common point for every enemy hit, makes it very easy for you to handle in AoE situations, because you basically pop in Shuriken Storm, eviscerate, Shuriken Storm, eviscerate. Plus, for every enemy that you hit with a Shuriken Storm, it'll buff you next eviscerate. So with Subtlety, you want to find the biggest, baddest enemy in the group, or find enemies that are fairly low and try to kind of snipe them, try to execute them very quickly, which makes the spec very viable in a lot of the fights and allows some players to even pull extra adds in order to take down the boss quicker. For example, if a group, let's say, can handle 1 or 2 adds hitting the tank while the boss is also hitting the tank, Subtlety Rogue is just going to get a little bit extra damage out of it. So it's kind of like, why not? Why shouldn't the Subtlety Rogue try to go for extra DPS, extra beefy burst? So you can kind of cheese mechanics like this in some sense. Overall though, very strong damage in the burst and has a good sustained damage afterwards to keep going, so the spec definitely has momentum and endurance. And then you have Assassination, which rose to fame with a Shrouded Suffocation build, which makes you go road in stealth, do more damage, and generate 3 common points. So the way Assassination would work is be gear dependent, and you would probably try to triple stack that buff. In the opener, you would want to open up with Garrote on as many enemies as possible and literally watch them melt from your Garrote alone. This also allows Assassination to have very strong spiky damage in the opener, but not quite as endurance heavy as Outlaw or Subtlety. Like, you'll have big damage in the opener, but the longer the fight goes, you're going to be a lot like other specs and classes for BFA. You're just going to be out of juice and out of energy very quickly. On top of that, Assassin can bring in a 6-second silence if you talent into it, so I guess it's a very interesting component of the spec. Maybe if you have a bunch of mobs trying to cast a spell, Vanish, triple silence can be very strong. We cut it in a place of a Boomkin silence, which is just like a beam, a solar beam that you just keep enemies under, and it has a perma silence as long as they are in the beam. So for a spec that is gear dependent, that brings something interesting that's a little different from other specs that seems maybe even less conventional, Assassination has a place, and a lot of people have been playing it recently with the nerfs to Outlaw and Subtlety. So you have all 3 specs that are technically viable, and I honestly think all 3 are good. But any spec you can make work. You just gotta put in the time, put in the gear, put in the effort, make sure you have the right stats, trinkets, and everything. So if you're trying to find a spec that you like, maybe a playstyle you enjoy, you can definitely make it happen. You just need to pick up the spec and figure out the best gear, do some research, look up some guides, figure out if you can get yourself the best Azurite traits to make it happen, and then you can do it. But because of all this, if you're someone who's a brand new player, I honestly recommend Outlaw. The playstyle is very simple. When it comes to switching gear, you don't have to worry about it. Single target is basically your AoE at the same time. Lots of people are taking Outlaw rogues because of the massive cleave damage, and even if you're not really a rogue main, even if you don't really know a lot about rogue CC, you can at least hop in and do some big deeps. The playstyle for Roll the Bones is really not that intrusive anymore, and I would have to say that Outlaw is probably one of the easier specs out of the 3. If I had to rank him, I'd probably say Outlaw is the simple and easiest, Assassination is pretty close behind, and then Subtlety will probably be the most difficult. But how difficult? That's a good question, because of all the, I would say, all the prunes that happened in previous expansions. That might be, offset you a little bit, but I do feel like Outlaw would be the spec for any new player. But of course, all 3 are viable right now and are usable. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. So if you were wondering which spec do I think is the best, or which one you should maybe start with, hopefully this video helped you guys out. My name is Darwin. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see all of you in another video.